Lawlead has been collecting data on lawyers for a quarter century, and it has found that men and women lawyers are more like each other than they're like either the general population of men or the general population of women with respect to their needs, their values, their attitudes, their interests, and their cognitive and behavioral preferences. In other words, with respect to the motivators that draw people to professions, to do certain kind of work, and that serve as career anchors that keep them there. Think about how needs, values, attitudes, and interests work. If you're in a job that meets your needs, that allows you to behave consistently with your values, and it gives you interesting work, what kind of attitude do you have? You've got a really good attitude, don't you? Yes. So, men and women who are interested in what you are interested in are probably going to be more like you than they're going to be like other men and women in the general population. As was the case in business and medicine, Lawlead has found that stereotypes about male and female lawyers are false. For instance, it's predicted women will all want to practice family law because they're nurturing, right? And what we found is that they're not drawn to certain specialties like that. Roughly the same percentages of men and women practice family law, practice litigation and courtroom lawyers, and work in transactional practices. Why is that? It's because the values relate to what draws them to the profession to do certain kind of work, things like justice and equality. And now that brings us to values, and I'd like to close by talking about 4 values that brought me to Karama. The 2 major values are search for truth and intellectual humility. These are dominant values for true scholars of all the Abrahamic religions, and they should be for us also. Search for truth comes from God's gift of an inquiring mind. The value of intellectual humility comes from the realization that as wonderful as these inquiring minds that God has given us are, compared to the mind of God, they're sort of deficient, are they not? And many of the things we think we know are in fact false. So how are we going to correct our misperceptions? How are we going to help people in power correct their misperceptions? Dr. Al-Hibri has given us some tips. And these relate to the 2 other values that serve the goals of search for truth and intellectual humility, and they are diversity and civility. To find truth, we need diversity of viewpoints, of cultures, of preferences and experiences. Whenever we have this kind of diversity, people different coming together, we're going to have one of 2 things. We're either going to have conflict or we're going to have synergy. What do I mean by synergy? Synergy is where different parties cooperate, or when we combine different resources and different people or different resources to achieve an advantageous outcome. An outcome that's greater than any of the parties or resources could have generated by themselves alone. Which we have. Conflict or synergy is going to be up to us, is it not? Achieving synergy can be difficult because there's usually a creative tension between the actors. This is where our final value, civility, comes in. The Yale Law professor Stephen Carter has written a book on civility that I highly recommend. In it, he makes 15 statements about civility. Essential 3, numbers 7, 8, and 9, are most important for our purposes and for yours when you elect your community. Number 7 is that there are some matters, like equality of the sexes, that are so important that we must discuss them with people with whom we disagree. As Dr. Al-Hibri has suggested, we have not only the right to discuss these differences, we have the responsibility to do so. How we do so is going to affect how effective we are. And that's point number 8. When we have this conversation, we have to consider the possibility that we are wrong and the people on the other side are right. And finally, we must treat both the subject matter and the persons with whom we have these discussions with respect. It is interesting that the only place we can make people with whom we disagree have these conversations in this manner is in courts of law. If we have a dispute about a matter that courts will hear, we can sue people and make them come in and discuss that matter. And if judges do their job, everyone is going to treat the subject matter and each other with respect. But when we bring suit, we must consider the fact that we may be wrong and the other side may be right. We may lose the case. And we may lose the case even when we are right because we have failed to convince the other side of the finder of fact that is neutral. Myra Bradwell had to consider that possibility when she sued to be allowed to practice law, did she not? And she lost that case. Suing someone is not always the best way to have these conversations, but it can start a conversation. And that's what she did. Because people perceived the outcome of her case to be unjust, the Illinois legislature passed a law the very same year that that Supreme Court case came down, saying that women would have the right to be lawyers in Illinois. So, we can compel those conversations if we're courageous enough, and we can cause change if we are respectful enough. We hope that in this program you will gain technical competence in Islamic jurisprudence that will equip you there, that you will achieve greater awareness of yourself and others and how you affect others and how others affect you when you have these conversations, and that you'll build dispute resolution skills of civility. But most of all, we hope we connect you steadfastly to each other, to Karama, and to the values that brought you here from around the world. May you be the agents of change that is consistent with these values. Thank you very much for being here.